so much been about the word commit. What people don't talk about is you have to recommit to what's most important every single day.
Welcome back to another episode of The Burn. I am Ben Newman, and I couldn't be any more fired up to have this opportunity to spend time with you again virtually. So it is a different world. We have this uncertainty. There's fears, there's doubts. And for you to spend this time with my good buddy, Antonio Neves, this is going to be a special episode for you. And you know how I do this. We don't talk a lot about bios. However, I mean, you take a look at that TV face that he has and that TV smile that he has. I was messing with him earlier. You know, he's been able to do a lot of things that I couldn't do because I didn't get a face like that. So, you know, he spent years, 10 years as a correspondent. You maybe saw him on NBC and PBS and Nickelodeon and E! He's emceed major events across the country, writing for Inc. and for Entrepreneur. And he's decided to pivot. I mean, you think of the courage that it takes to do some of those things that I just mentioned, but then the courage to pivot while becoming a father and a dedicated husband. You know, so oftentimes we get comfortable where we are. You're on TV, things are going good, and then you pivot to coming into a world where now you get to coach and you're traveling the world speaking. And just the travel and just it's amazing what you have done. I will never forget, you know, we connected through John Gordon's Power of Positive Summit. We were both speakers. We kind of had this great connection and energy, and then we were able to link up in LA. And I'll never forget that sushi dinner, man. It was one of those where we're sitting there having sushi. We ate a lot of sushi that night. And I was thinking to myself, man, Antonio's like that guy that I've known for like 20, 30 years. And it was really the first time that we'd met in person. And those are the relationships where, you know, like, man, even though we're busy, we're doing things, like we've had some great conversations about our work, sharing different ideas. So I'm so excited for people to have the opportunity, you know, our individuals that watch The Burn, to spend time with you today. And I'd love to start with your burn. You know, so what is it that has motivated you? What has been that drive for you, that fire inside of you that's caused you to do so many great things?
Yeah, first I got to say, I knew you were special. I knew you were unique before we had that sushi dinner when I met you at your hotel. And when we met, you walked down in the lobby and you gave me a book and a manual. Like the fact that the first time we meet, you had something to give to me that I really appreciated that, because so many people don't always do that. They don't add value right away. And I was like, this guy is special. And it was autographed and I still have it. Regarding the burn, you mentioned it, you know, Google, Ben, as you know, it only tells part of the story, right? You can Google someone, see they work for this organization, they've done X, Y, or Z, but Google only tells part of the story. So today I work with these networks. I'm a speaker, I'm a coach, got books coming out, etc. But Google will never tell you that I'm from a small town in Michigan. One of those towns people don't leave. Google will never tell you that I'm from a blue collar background. My dad's worked in factories his whole life. My mother was an administrative assistant for the same organization for over 30 years. Google would never tell you that, you know, before I graduated from high school, I moved over 15 different times in this small hometown. It will never tell you that between my mother and father are six divorces total. It will never tell you that I know what it's like to live in a shelter for battered and abused women and children. I don't share that information with you to make you feel sorry for me. I share that with you because Google will never tell you the whole story about the folks that you meet in this life. And when you talk about burn coming up and with that instability that I experienced, somehow, some way, being the youngest of three kids, I always knew there had to be another way. There's nothing in my life that told me that, but internally, I always knew that there had to be another way to live this life. And I was fortunate enough through athletics. I was a first generation college student. And then I walked on the track and field team. And my mentality has always been a walk-on mentality, because as you know, if you're a walk-on, nothing is guaranteed. You're not on scholarship. Any day you could get cut from that team. So I've had this blue collar work ethic, and I knew that there was always more. And I wanted to see what that was. And one thing I've never been afraid of based on my upbringing is hard work. I mean, you know, I come from an era looking at my dad working in factories his whole life. I remember when people would get excited about overtime.
Mm.
Like they hoped there was overtime for the weekend or for the evening. And when I got to New York City, I can still remember folks had never heard of Western Michigan University. People had these brand name resumes. But one thing I knew is that if I got in the door, it would game over because I could outwork you, I could out hustle you, and I was committed and dedicated in a different way. So that's something that has always stuck in me. My background that I think for a lot of people could say, oh man, woe is me, this has happened. I looked at that as fuel for me to move forward and do some unique things.
See, I love that. So you just said the word fuel, and a lot of times there's people who struggle with this concept. What does the burn mean? And I always share that's that fuel, that fire that actually lights that why and that purpose on fire to then take the necessary action to do what you need to do. And it sounds like you've kept, right now you're coast to coast. I mean, you've lived in New York, now your beautiful family is in LA. And so how important has the burn remained going from coast to coast? How often do you reconnect back to and think about, and what kind of perspective does it give you seeing some of that blue collar background that you grew up with? How often do you connect to that today?
I connect that on a regular basis, man. You know, the hands are always willing to get dirty in the dirt. And when I made that pivot, you talked about 8 years ago, moving from television, when everyone told me that I was crazy to leave this successful television career in New York City to shift into the leadership and development space, I needed the burn. I needed the fuel. I had to come to accept, Ben, the reason why I chose the television industry in many ways is because I was seeking validation. It was when an organization like a NBC or a PBS or a Nickelodeon said, we want you, Antonio, that I felt valid, that I felt like I was worth something. But I reached finally a point in my career when I realized I was doing this for the wrong reason, even though I was good at it and I was a great storyteller. And I realized there were other things that I wanted to do in my life. And I felt like I knew that I was most on fire when I was supporting others, when I was encouraging others, when I was using my story to help them. And that's when I dug in, man. And I left that industry behind. And those first few years, as you know, man, they're not easy when you begin. Those calls aren't coming as frequently. You're not speaking internationally. You're not doing shows like The Burn. And that's when you find those moments that you have to recommit. We talk so much, Ben, about the word commit. What people don't talk about is you have to recommit to what's most important every single day. And now,
that's such a great point.
Yeah, man, you got to recommit. And now all I got to do is look at my family, my wife and my 4-year-old twins. That's all I need to recommit. All I got to do is look at this life. Frankly, I've been blessed with to recommit. I think about when it talks about committing is when I worked for those networks, they gave me value. But at some point we have to be willing to stand alone. And that's not always easy. It's easy to say, I'll work for this company. I'll work for this plant. I work for this company. I play for this team. I'm in this band. But when you're willing to stand for yourself, it's truly unique. A quick story I think you're going to appreciate. Years ago, when I was speaking at a college in Georgia, a student came up to me and he said, hey, man, how do you get that blue verified check mark that people have on social media? And then I have that on Facebook and Twitter, and I would never really thought about the question. And inherently, I knew the answer. You got to be some notable public figure. I was a journalist, so that's how I got that kind of stuff. But I asked the kid, I was like, why do you want the blue verified check mark? Why is that important to you? And he said, well, I want to show that it's me. And I said, well, is there another you that I should be aware of? I said, what's the real reason? He says, I want to show that I'm important. And I just had to pause and I shared with him. I said, no blue check mark can verify you. You were verified the day that you were born. And that's a message I try to instill not only in myself, but in others as well, to continue that fuel, to continue that fire. What an opportunity. We're talking about these unprecedented times, right? Ben, isn't technically every day unprecedented, right?
Yeah.
We woke up, our feet hit the ground. This day, whether we're in a pandemic or not, is unprecedented. And I do my darndest, man, to treat each day like that.
I love that story. I'm loving the direction that you're going. I want to pull something, the media. I want to talk about the media because it's interesting. You hear, I want people to recognize me. I want people to know. And sometimes, and I think there's probably so many people, we've all been watching so much news. Some people have turned it off, but I feel like at some level you have to stay connected to understand what's going on. But, you and I talked a little bit, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. Like, sometimes the news, it's like, man, is this correspondent? Like, is this about them? Is this politician? Is this about them? As opposed to, like, I just want the real information. And so I'd love to hear your thoughts in this world that we live in. Are you happy to not be a correspondent in times like this right now and to not be on TV? And then what are your thoughts on how some of this information is relayed today?
Yes, I'm happy not to be in that field. And let's be clear, I have a lot of respect for journalists that are out there doing a lot of hard work, a lot of folks we don't necessarily hear about because we're only looking at some of the mainstream information. And let's be clear, television is a very egocentric industry. A lot of folks do get in the industry because they want to be seen. There's a lot of folks that are seeking that validation that I mentioned earlier with you. Today, what breaks my heart, whether you turn on some of the major cable channels, is that they're all primarily fear-based. If it bleeds, it leads. And, I think there's a lot of important information that needs to be shared, but they want to keep people watching. That's the goal at the end of the day, to make sure you don't turn the channel to another network. And one ways they do that is by stoking fear in people. And that's how you keep staying on that channel. There are a lot of other ways to convey some of the same information, the same data, et cetera, without stoking fear. So in my household, we very rarely, if at all, watch television news. We have our go-to news sources that we trust, that we verify, and that give us the key information that we need to know. There's enough anxiety right now in people. There's enough stress in folks right now. And my hope is a lot of people know they can get what they need out of some, good news sources a couple of times a day. I invite you just to check your energy from the time you turn on the television and watch the news to the time you turn it off. Your energy, your fear, everything just changes. So you have the opportunity to push pause at any moment. And don't get me wrong, Ben, I don't fault these men and women on the television stations. That agenda is coming from above. They know that it works. Even in quote unquote regular times on local news, what do they lead with? Do they lead with the good news, the foundation opening a new center for kids? No, they lead with crime. They lead with theft. They lead with the murder. Not to say those things aren't important, but they're leading with something that's going to scare you as opposed to empower you.
Well, I love your thoughts there. I'm glad that I asked that question, and glad that you're willing to go there. And off of here, I want you to send me an email with those sources that you trust, because I think that's a great thing. I mean, the point that you bring up, what was your energy like when you put that on button on, and what was the energy like when you turned it off? And actually leads me to a very exciting announcement. We are going to be the first ones live here on The Burns, the first time we've ever had the opportunity to do this. I couldn't be any more excited for Antonio. Congratulations to you and your family. It's one of the things that you mentioned when we had that sushi dinner that was going to happen. It's one of the things I love about you. You say you're going to do something, it happens. You say you're going to get into the world of sports because you were an athlete, now you're doing it. But you told me that you would be an author, and in January of 2021, your first book is going to be coming out, Stop Living on Autopilot. Take responsibility for your life and rediscover a bolder, happier you. Man, that is a title that just screams accountability. And so what I'd love is, I'd love to hear a little bit about the book, and I'd love for you to tie that into how you've seen accountability, because I think this is important right now that you're working in sports, now that you are working in the business world, how it's pretty common. You and I have talked about it. A lot of there's accountability everywhere, business, sports, wherever it is. I think a lot of times, if we're not happy with where we are, it's because we're not holding ourselves accountable. So tell us about the book and tell us about accountability.
Yeah, just briefly, one thing you always talk about that I love are the unseen hours. And the unseen hours prior to me getting this book deal with Penguin Random House, Harmony Rodale, is 3 self-published books, right? That have made a difference for me. The unseen hours are getting rejected by tons of publishers before someone said yes. I started writing this book, man, working on it back in 2015 before I got that deal in 2019. So that's just a reminder of persistence. The book, Stop Living on Autopilot, it really is about taking accountability for your life. I open up in the book talking about University of Texas when they beat USC in that Rose Bowl back in 2006 when nobody picked them to beat USC. And people always talk about that game, how the underdog won. People very rarely talk about in the locker room after the game when Mac Brown congratulated his team. And he said, "Congratulations, men, and don't let this be the best thing that ever happens to you." Don't let winning a college national championship be the best thing that ever happens to you. Be great men, be great contributors of society, be great leaders, be great husbands, fathers, etc. I think a lot of people, Ben, right now believe that the best thing that ever happened to them is behind them as opposed to in front of them. You hear folks talking about college was the best years of my life, high school was the best years, that vacation was the best. And my thing is, if college was the best years of your life, what have you been doing since? This book digs into reminding people that you have a say in your life. Because at some point we end up on cruise control. At some point we end up on autopilot. And don't get me wrong, cruise control, autopilot, guess what? It can look good because the resume can look good. Those posts on Instagram, oh, you're happy. Even the bank account can look good, but you know deep inside something's wrong. You feel that tap on the shoulder all the time saying this is good, but it's not the life I really want to live. So the book digs into how we can truly recommit to what's most important, to remember that you have a say in this life, to take responsibility. And I'll keep it blunt, man. It reminds you that no one cares. No one can care more about your life than you do. Your teachers care, your spouse cares, your family members care, your colleagues care, your boss, your coach, on and on and on. Yes, they care, but no one can care more than you. At some point, you got to take the reins back for your life. And the genesis for this book, man, is I was one of those people that on paper, everything looked great. But internally, man, I was wilting. And I realized what had happened to me, Ben, and without getting into the full story, is that I had stopped doing some of those things that got me to where I was. That walk-on mentality I was telling you about, I had got into cruise control. And I knew that I had to bring some boldness back into my life. I knew I had to be courageous once again in my life as I previously was, as I settled into cruise control. I like to think about us as individuals sometimes like a Lamborghini. We're a fine piece of Italian engineering. And Ben, imagine if you had a Lamborghini and you only drove it at 35 miles per hour. A Lamborghini is not built to go 35 miles per hour.
Right.
By the way, in LA, it makes me laugh because sometimes you do see Lamborghinis going 35 miles per hour because of the traffic. And I'll pull up next to them at the stoplight in the Honda Odyssey minivan. I'm like, see you at the next light. But we weren't built to go 35 miles per hour. We have the opportunity to shift gears. And that's what we forget. We can shift gears, man, and put our foot on that pedal to really reimagine our future, to rediscover what makes us great. And most importantly, live a life that says the best thing to happen to me hasn't happened yet.
I think that's such a powerful thing to hear, especially in a period of time right now where people have so much fear, so much doubt, so much uncertainty. Are things ever going to be the way that they once were? And, you know, I've been sharing with people just kind of flipping this perspective, and we talked about it a little earlier too, like we are not in quarantine. Like, man, that just doesn't even sound good to me. I am on a working sabbatical, and I am enjoying every single minute of it. I'm enjoying every meal that I get with the family and the movies we get to watch, and taking the dog around the neighborhood more than I normally get to because I'm on the road traveling, and I'm enjoying the sabbatical. I know it was the same for you, and I intend on coming out of this sabbatical better than I came in. And if I'm hearing you correctly, it's a choice to have that mindset. It's a choice to say, I see something greater right? I see something greater in front of me. But then back to what you shared, you got to keep that blue collar mentality. You have to have a willingness to do the work. And
Absolutely.
I hope people realize, just how special today's message was, because there's so much of what you said that is going to be so meaningful in uncertain times, but also so important when every person watching gets to that point where things are really great. And then they have to remind themselves again, the greatest is still in front of you. Because to me, we're always a working product. We are never finished. And so I'm so thankful for you. I'm so excited for everybody. I'm glad we got to announce that the first big published book is coming out in January 2021, announcing that title of that book here. So make sure everybody stay tuned, stay connected to Antonio. His messaging is incredible. And man, I'm always in your corner, and I appreciate you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to watch you. You inspire me. You motivate me. You always take my calls. You've been a mentor and a friend. So thank you, and keep keeping me hustling, man, because I see those videos you post and I'm like, I got to step it up.
Iron sharpens iron, man. It goes both ways. So I appreciate you.